Imagine someone collapses on a busy street. Dozens of people walk past. Not one of them stops. You have probably heard a story like this. Maybe you have seen it yourself. And every time the same question rises in your chest. Why didn't anyone help? The easy answer is that people are selfish, that modern life has made us cold, that cities strip away something essential and human. But the real answer is far stranger. Because the truth is, the more people who witness a crisis, the less likely any single one of them is to act. And that includes you. This is not a flaw in bad people. It is a flaw in all people. In March of 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. The assault lasted over half an hour. 38 neighbors, it was reported, heard or witnessed some part of the attack. Almost none of them called the police. She died. The story stunned the public. Psychologists John Darley and Bibb Latané were stunned too. But instead of accepting the obvious explanation, they asked a harder question. What if those neighbors were not monsters? What if they were just people? What if any group of people, under the right conditions, would do exactly the same thing? So they ran an experiment. They brought participants into separate rooms and told each one they would be having a group discussion over an intercom. The topic did not matter. What mattered was this. At some point during the conversation, one of the voices on the intercom would begin to have what sounded like a seizure. They would gasp. They would speak incoherently. They would call for help. What Darley and Latané were actually measuring was how quickly each participant would leave their room to get help, or whether they would at all. When participants believed they were the only other person in the discussion, 85% of them got up and helped within the first minute. The response was fast. It was almost instinctive. But when participants believed there were 4 other people on the call who could also hear the crisis, only 31% of them helped. And they were slower, much slower. The group did not make people more likely to act. It made them dramatically less likely to act. Darley and Latané called it diffusion of responsibility. When you are the only witness to a crisis, the full weight of it lands on you. The moral pressure is total. But the moment another person is present, that weight divides. With 2 witnesses, each person unconsciously feels only half responsible. With 5 witnesses, each person feels 1/5 responsible. With 38, the math barely registers at all. Your brain is performing a calculation it does not announce. It is redistributing the burden, silently, without your permission. But diffusion of responsibility is only half the story. There is a second force at work, and it is even more insidious. Psychologists call it pluralistic ignorance, and it is the reason you look around in a crisis before you act. When something ambiguous happens, a sudden sound, a person slumping, a smell coming from somewhere, your brain does not trust its own assessment. It looks for confirmation. It scans the faces of the people around you to see how they are reacting. If they look calm, your brain concludes this probably is not an emergency. Here is the terrible irony. Every single person in that crowd is doing the same thing at the same time. Every person is looking at every other person for a signal. And because everyone is suppressing their alarm to appear composed, every person sees a crowd of calm people and concludes the same false thing. This is probably fine. You are all misleading each other simultaneously. Researcher Stanley Milgram, who spent decades studying how social environments shape individual behavior, described urban crowds as systems that generate their own norms. Not norms chosen deliberately, but norms that emerge from people watching people watching people. The crowd teaches itself what to do, and sometimes what it teaches itself is do nothing. This is not a uniquely modern problem. It is not a city problem or a social media problem or a generation problem. It is a feature of human social architecture that has been with you from the beginning. Your ancestors lived in groups of roughly 50 to 150 people. In that world, your survival was tightly bound to your group's survival. Reading the group's behavior was essential. If the elders looked calm, the threat was probably manageable. If they ran, you ran. Mirroring the group was not passivity. It was intelligence. It kept you alive. But evolution did not anticipate a world of anonymous strangers. It did not anticipate a subway car packed with people who have no shared history, no social bonds, no responsibility to one another. The ancient social software is running in a new environment it was never designed for, and it is producing outputs that look from the outside like cruelty. They are not cruelty. They are miscalibration. Bibb, Latané, and John Darley went on to replicate their findings across dozens of studies. They staged smoke filling a room. They scattered fake epileptic episodes. They planted actors who dropped their groceries and cried out in distress. Again and again, the pattern held. The bigger the crowd, the longer the response time, and the greater the chance that no one responded at all. But they also discovered the antidote, and it is almost embarrassingly simple. If you are ever in a crisis and you need help, do not shout at a crowd. Do not yell at nobody. Pick one specific person. Point at them. Make eye contact. Say, "You in the red jacket, please call 911. The moment you do that, the diffusion shatters. The responsibility snaps back into a single individual, and that individual almost always acts. What Darley and Latané had discovered was not that people are unwilling to help. They discovered that anonymity makes moral clarity impossible. The crowd does not decide not to help. The crowd prevents the decision from ever being made. There's a concept in emergency response training called the bystander mobilization strategy. It is built entirely on this principle. First responders are trained to single out individuals in a crowd by appearance or position, to collapse the group into a series of one-on-one obligations. Because one-on-one, people almost always rise to the moment. You are not immune to this effect. Neither am I. That is not a comfortable thing to sit with. But understanding it changes something. Psychologist Art Markman has written about how awareness of cognitive biases does not automatically override them, but it does create a pause, a small window, a moment in which your deliberate mind can catch what your automatic mind is doing and make a different choice. When you know about the bystander effect, you are slightly more likely to notice the moment it is happening inside you. You are slightly more likely to recognize the freeze, the scan of other faces, the unconscious wait for someone else to move first. And in that recognition, there is a gap. And in that gap, there is a choice. Most people who failed to help were not bad people. They were confused people, uncertain people, people waiting for the crowd to give them permission to act, in a crowd full of people doing the exact same thing. The ancient instinct that makes you look to the group for guidance is not wrong. It is just incomplete. It needs one more step. It needs you to know that in an emergency, the crowd will not give you permission. You have to give it to yourself. Tonight, you will probably not witness a crisis on a street corner, but you have almost certainly felt the freeze before. That moment when something happens and you wait a half second too long. When you look around before you look inward. When you feel the presence of other people redistribute a weight that was meant to land on you. That pause is not evidence that you are selfish. It is evidence that you are human. The question is what you do in the half second after it. When Kitty Genovese collapsed on that street in 1964, the world looked at 38 people and saw 38 failures. Darley and Latané looked at the same 38 people and saw a system, a predictable, reproducible system that any group of people in any city, in any era, would produce under the same conditions. You are not separate from that system. You are inside it. You always have been, but now you know how it works. And knowing how trap works is the first step toward walking around it.